Over the last several weeks, we've been monitoring the library bill. That's what it's being dubbed. This is a bill that would protect kids from obscene materials. There's existing obscenity law, and this would simply bring libraries and librarians underneath existing obscenity laws. Some of these books I couldn't give to a kid on the street, so why should the librarian? It would be illegal for me, but it's not for them. It also sets up a process whereby parents can go to their school library or their county library, and there's a process to question some of these books that are just quite frankly evil, in my opinion, what they're doing to kids. So this went before the House Judiciary Committee yesterday. Today is Wednesday. This is being recorded, and it failed on a voice vote. So I wanted to reach out to the Senate sponsor of this bill. Senator Dan Sullivan joins us again. Dan, welcome back to the program, sir.
Thank you. It failed, passed in the Senate with 27 votes. It passed easily out of committee. It got hung up over here in the House, and I think we're going to try to amend it and bring it back hopefully this week. There were some amendments requested, pretty simple language. Maybe I think it probably helps the bill. And if we can get it through this week, and we plan to do that, get it onto the House floor early next week.
Okay, so can you go over some of the problems? I mean, and do some of the changes, are some of the changes going to make the bill better, or are they going to make the bill less effective? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it was actually just a two-word change. We had determined in there, and there's another word that we need to use instead of determined. We're still working on that to make sure we get the language correct. But it's just a change, a very small change that could affect whether the impact of the bill later on. But it's not a substantial change. It's not any change to the intent of the bill, which is to codify a new process where in schools and county libraries, city and county libraries. Of course, the biggest one, Paul, we've already talked about this, is taking the appeal process in the public library all the way up through your locally elected officials. And there was some concern yesterday in the committee whether or not the county and city officials were the right people and whether they had the authority to do that. The issue is, the response to that is that yes, they do. That the municipal league that represents the mayors and the Arkansas County Association, none of those people have showed up to testify against the bill. Some of them have concerns about it, or they don't like to take on the responsibility. But I said yesterday in committee, the people in the city council and on the Arkansas quorum court, their quorum courts, those people ran for that office. They decided they wanted to take on that responsibility of governance for our county operations. That's their job. And this bill simply moves that appeal process on to people that are in charge of local governance.
And, it's a common sense piece of legislation that's addressing a real problem.
Yes.
Senator Sullivan, can you just tell people, for the record, what the problem is? I mean, what has driven this?
Yeah, it's been people who want an appeals process at their county library and in their school. In the school side, there's no codified process. The Arkansas School Board Association has recommended language, but not all schools use that same language. So this just codifies that language so that all the schools have the same process. The other thing it does for schools is the local school committee making the determination on whether the book is appropriate or inappropriate for children. That is often done confidentially behind closed doors. This bill would make sure that that is done publicly and a written response as to why the book was moved or removed or not removed. And the same thing for the public library. Most libraries have a process. Now they will have the process. And that will go up through your local governance there, which I think is a good thing. And it's all transparent. Everything has to be done in everybody.
It absolutely is. I want to show this put up on the screen in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette this morning in reporting on the bill and what happened the other day. Opponents of the bill, this is what they say. Opponents of the bill argued that the bill would invest legislative bodies with judicial power and disproportionately impact books written by and about LGBTQ people. I mean, yeah, that's the point of in a lot. The issue here is that we have these books that are all about sex and the LGBT, and they're being given to kids.
Well, that may be true in some uh, localities. It may not be true in others. So all this bill does, it doesn't address LGBTQ. It doesn't address those issues. What it does is provide for an appeal process up through locally elected officials. So if a parent thinks a book is too whatever, fill in the blank, now you have a consistent, transparent appeals process. Because you may have a book in one county that sets a community standard of, and you may have a book, the same book, in another community that has a different view of the book. So this just turns it back to the locally elected officials and lets those locally elected officials do their job with full transparency.
I mean, you're exactly right. And look, and I understand this is the right way to go about the problem. Okay,
Right.
I mean, the problem that I highlighted, living in Jonesboro, you represent me. You are actually my, state senator. We know what's been going on here. The Arkansas legislature knows what's been going on here, and it is going on in other places. But this is a way to essentially codify it, to put this in the code, to give the process, but also, and I want you to comment on this because this is a big deal. Existing obscenity laws are not going to change. The only thing that is changing here is we have obscenity laws on the books. We have laws on the books right now that say, there's a process, the way a judge can rule to find something obscene, and we agree that obscenity is bad. Obscenity is wrong, and so this would bring libraries and librarians underneath existing obscenity laws, right?
Correct. I disagree a little bit. Some people would give obscenity to children. The American Library Association absolutely would. They have said that in their policy, and we had that American Library Association policy in some of our local libraries. So people need to look into that. The other thing we've done, Paul, is clearly defined what is harmful to children. We already have harmful to children legislation. Children can't smoke. They can't drive vehicles. They can't own a gun. There are a lot of things we do to protect children. So we've actually identified language that is already in code that imposes that same restriction on libraries. So not only is there obscenity, there's also harmful to children. Could be two different things. Obviously, obscenity is, but there could be other issues that are harmful to children. But what this bill does, Paul, and probably the most important part, again, if you have a book that you would like to have moved 20 feet from the children's section to the teen section or to the all adult section, this bill gives you a pathway to the librarian, to the library board, and then to your quorum quarter city council. This quorum quarter city council could say, move the book 20 feet or move the book to a different section. If the librarian chooses not to do that, they can. There's no legal penalty. If the quorum court says leave the book where it is, that's their final determination. If the quorum court says move it to a different section, that's what they recommend. There's no legal penalty for that the quorum court nor the city council can impose. So saying we're going to give the city council powers they don't have, city councils have no judicial power. Quorum courts have no judicial power. They can't rule a book obscene. They can move it to a different section. The librarian can say, I'm not doing it. I wouldn't recommend that, but they can. If the quorum court said, we're okay with the book, and the prosecutor came in, and the prosecutor said, look, we think this book is harmful to children, that's independent of the city council or the quorum court. That's your local prosecutor making that decision, not either one of those state agencies.
Well, and again, that the prosecutors run for office, so again, these prosecutor local elections. There's going to be some talk about obscenity now. What are you going to consider obscene?
Exactly.
What convictions? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the intent, to take these issues to locally elected officials, not bureaucracies and bureaucrats, not employees, but to locally elected officials. That's the goal.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind taking after this law passes, taking it to the sheriff. Honestly, I think that's some of the wake up calls that are going to have to happen to quit
Right.
with these evil books. Senator Dan Sullivan, it's always great to talk to you. I know you're busy down there, and I know you took a lot of time to give to us. Real quick, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Governor Sanders, just signed the Lawrence Act. I know you were at this ceremony. How was it?
It was great. And as was said, this is the beginning of the hard work. There's some great opportunities, but the beginning of the hard work is going now, where we're going to have to put what's promised into action. And I'm looking forward to doing that.